Hi everybody, I'm Matt Hernandez. I'm a photographer from Paducah, Kentucky, and today I'm going to take you through how I process this raw image and come up with this final image right here. Now, usually when I do a tutorial on something, there's going to be some sort of issue with it that may be slightly out of the ordinary, and that's what I try to do to help people learn to how to overcome, certain things that may happen on shoots that you can't control. And this is a good example because, as you can see, the top of this wall has quite a bit less contrast than the bottom of it. The reason is because the sun was setting behind these guys, and I knew the sun was setting obviously, but on the back of my camera the pictures looked fine. When I got back to the studio, put them on the computer, different story. Anytime there was a sun flare coming in, anytime that happens, you're going to get some washed out colors and lose contrast. So that created quite a bit more editing time, but it also is a good opportunity for tutorial to show you how to fix something like that. So the basic lighting setup here is I've got this wall, this nice blue wall behind them. It kind of matches their uniforms a little bit. We're going to make it match anyway. Doesn't quite match yet, but so I've got a strobe behind him aimed at the wall with a silver reflector that's creating that highlight, and then I've got an octabox to the left here. So I shoot a lot of teams, and anytime I shoot a team, I try to shoot the individual photos pretty close to the same. That way you can process them faster in Lightroom and Photoshop. And what I usually do is I'll edit one, and I'll figure out what I'm doing, and then I'll create a preset in Lightroom so that and I can sync all the rest of the pictures to it, and it streamlines workflow. That's what I've done here. You can go over to presets in the develop module of Lightroom and click this plus button, and then you can add presets with all the settings that you want. So we're going to go ahead and select the one that I made for these pictures right here, and that's gonna basically what I did here was I upped the exposure a little bit, decreased the contrast, darkened the highlights, and brightened up the shadows a little bit just to flatten it out just a hair, because I know I'm going to build contrast in Photoshop. Now you can see there's a little purple lens flare here too, but that's not going to be an issue because we're going to crop this down. So we're ready to go here. I'm on a Mac, I'm going to press Command E, and it's going to open it up in Photoshop. And we actually already had it open, so let's close this one. Okay, so we know we're going to have to separate him from the background. Anybody that's watched my tutorials in the past knows that I love the pen tool. I think it's great, one of the best tools in Photoshop. It gives you so much versatility and power. It's great, but there is a big learning curve, so a lot of people try to stay away from it. I suggest learning how to use it. I'm pretty quick with it, but still, I think that it will probably take me more time to use the pen tool here than use the quick selection tool, and we don't have to have a perfect cutout here. So, because we're basically going to separate him from the background, then apply some adjustment layers to the background to fix this loss of color and contrast here. So you can go over here and select your quick selection tool, or you can press W. That's the quick command for it. Now, I use a tablet, but whether you're on a mouse or a tablet, a quick way to change your brush size without having to go over here and click on this and adjust the hardness and size, you can hold Control and Option and drag to the right to make your brush bigger, drag to the left to make it smaller. You can drag it up to feather the edge more, decrease the hardness, drag it down to make it harder. So that's a quick way to adjust your brush without having to move around. And it's all about speed. You want to edit your pictures as fast as possible. So, okay, I'm going to make my hardness, I'm not going to make it 100%, I'm going to make it about 70, we got 71 here. Okay, so we're just going to go in and start painting on his body. See what we get. There's pretty good contrast between him and the background, so I knew that this was going to work really well. That's why I'm not using the pen tool here. Just a little bit of his hair here. Get his head. Now you can see there's a little bit of a hair light here from the sun, which actually worked out really great. So it's almost worth it that this flare is in here because I know I can take care of it. So, by the way, Command H will hide your selection, and you've still got it active, and then Command H again will bring it back. Okay, let's get in here and get his hand and get the glove. Get this little area here. Okay, now let's go in here and get this leather. Oop. Command Z undo will undo what you just did there last step, by the way. Okay, now see what happened right there? I selected some of the background. That can be annoying because a lot of times when you select part of the background on accident, That's because Photoshop can't recognize the difference between that and the foreground, or the area is too tight. A trick a lot of people don't know is, just press Command Z there, you can train the quick selection tool. And the way that you do that, I'm going to make my brush bigger here. You can hold Option to make that little minus come up, and you can take away the selection. Well, when you've got a selection made, if you're having that happen, if you keep selecting part of the background, you can hold Option and go in and paint where you don't want the quick selection tool to pick up. And by doing this, you're going to train it so that it selects what you want. Now I just trained it, and I'm going to go back in and select this again. And see, it just snapped right to it there. Really handy to know how to do that. Let's get all these little pieces of leather. I'm going to train it here too, because I can go ahead and tell you that's probably going to select part of the background. Just from experience. I know tight areas like that are kind of hard with the quick selection tool sometimes. And again, this does not have to be 100% perfect. It just needs to be close. Train this. Okay. I'm not going to worry about those little areas between his glove because you're not going to see those. Got his head. And there we go. Got it. Okay. Now, just to be safe, I'm going to save this selection. I'm going to go up to Select, Save Selection, and name it Player. What I did there. Okay, now we're going to hit the W tool again to go back to your quick selection tool and hit Refine Edge. Make sure Auto Enhance is checked. Okay, now the only thing I'm going to do here, and there's no magic formula for the Refine Edge. A lot of people think there is, but there's really not. It depends on the image. I always click Smart Radius. I start at 15, and I shift the edge to -5. That's really about it. And then the output is really what you need. So right now I've got a new layer with layer mask. So I'm going to make the brush a little bit bigger, again holding Command and Option to do that. And I'm going to paint over his hair here, so I'm going to get some of these little loose hairs. There we go. And over here. And that looks good, so I'm going to hit OK. It's going to create a new layer with layer mask. Now, if you want to look at it just to see what your mask looks like, Command 0 will make me go full screen here. I'm going to press Option and click on the mask, and there it is. That looks pretty strong. There's some ghosting, but again, not going to matter. Not for this. Okay, so let's go ahead and fix the background. Now, so the first thing I'm going to do, curves is one of the most powerful things you can do. You can use in Photoshop. You can adjust color with it. You can increase or decrease contrast. You can lighten or darken an image. I mean, you can change color. There's a lot of, it's a lot of things you can do. That's what we're going to use to fix this. So we're going to go down here to our layers palette. We're going to go to the bottom, the fourth tool over. This little circle that's half white and half gray, we're going to click on it, and we're going to go to curves. These are our adjustment layers. And we're going to make sure we're on the background first there, and then do that so it's over the background, because the background is what we want to affect here. So the main thing that we notice is this is a lot lighter than the bottom, so we want that to match. So I'm going to, if you're in the RGB color space here, and what you're going to do, when you click this little line here, it's going to give you a point, and you can drag it up or down. You can drag it anywhere you want, actually. But up makes the image, whatever you're on top of, lighter, and you drag it down, it makes it darker. So we're going to darken this down a little bit. Drag it straight down, and then that darken the bottom too. So what we're going to do is, we're going to click on the mask, and then I'm going to press G for my gradient tool. White is my foreground color, so I'm going to click about right here, and we want this to fade into the bottom part here. So we're going to click and drag to create a gradient. There we go. Now, there's before and there's after. That looks a lot better. Maybe a tad darker right there. And actually this still looks a little bit light. So we're going to create another curves layer on top of that one. And I'm going to press G again for my gradient tool. Now we just want this part to be visible because that still looks a little bit washed out more than this side. We're going to make sure you clicked on the mask, mask it, and then I'm going to darken that part too. Right there, okay. Now, let's group these by selecting both of them, hold Shift and click on both of them, and then press Command G. We're going to name this Curves. Okay, so there's before and there's after. Okay, so we're making good progress. Again, this is only affecting the background because we have a cutout of him on top. And we're going to go ahead and double click on that and name that cutout. I usually name and group all my layers just for organization. Okay, now this is blue, but it's not the same color as his jersey. I want it to match a little bit more. So that's another thing we can do with the curves is adjust the color. So I'm going to click on top of that last one and then click the adjustment layer again and then go to curves, add another curves layer, and then we're going to click on RGB here. And we're going to go down and we're just going to affect the blue channel. And when you drag up in these specific colors, you got red, green, and blue. When you drag up, it adds that color. When you drag down, it takes that away and adds its complementary color. So we're going to add blue. We're going to click in the middle, and we're going to drag up, and we're going to make this a little bit more blue right about there. And that looks good. There's before, and there's after. Now that's really starting to pop. And there's nice separation here with that hair light, and this is going to, and the white uniform really stands out. So this is going to end up looking pretty good, I think. Okay. All right, and one thing we didn't do, we didn't take out some of this distracting stuff in the background. We're going to do that real quick. I'm going to click on the background layer. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to go down to my layers palette, that button beside the trash can, click that, and I'm just going to create a blank layer. I'm going to press J to get my healing brush, and I'm going to go in and I've got my mode set to, or align sample set to current and below, so it's going to sample this layer and below. You never want to sample or never want to paint on the actual layer with your image, because if you screw up, then you're screwed pretty much. So I'm just going to take out. I'm not going to. I love this texture. That's why I use the wall, but there's some parts of it that are a little bit distracting. So I'm pressing Option to sample and the area that I want to clone, and then I'm painting over the part that I want to get rid of, and it is blending those together for me. That, as opposed to the stamp tool, which actually copies what you sample. So I'm just selecting some of the little lighter pieces that are a little bit distracting. I don't want to get rid of all of them, just a few of them, just to help the image a little bit more clean. But we're going to keep this overall how it looks, because I think it's pretty cool texture. This would actually be a good wall to just take a picture of to save my texture library. Okay. All right. That looks good. Command minus to zoom out. All right. So let's see how distracting those little areas are. It looks a lot better now. Even though it's subtle changes, it looks better. All right. I'm going to name this heal for the healing brush. Okay, now there's a little bit of red up here, a little purple, and we're going to crop this, so it's not going to matter, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to take that out anyway just to show you how. All right, so I'm going to go back to my curves group, click on the top layer, then I'm going to add another curves adjustment layer, and we're going to select the red channel, and we're going to drag that down just a little bit. There we go. Okay, now we need to just, I'm going to make sure you're on the mask and press Command I to invert it, so now it's hidden. Black conceals, white reveals when you're on a mask. I'm going to press F to go to full screen, so I can, and then I'm pressing spacebar to bring up the hand tool to move around too, by the way. I'm going to zoom in. There's the purple. All right, so we're going to press B for our brush, make sure white is selected. I'm going to set my flow to about 20%, and then go in here and paint some of that out. There we go. That's a very subtle difference, but you can see it is making a difference. And I'm actually going to go back to RGB, and I'm going to darken it just a hair. Again, I'm going to Option click, see where my mask is, so we need to paint right here a little bit too. There we go. And again, I'm going to crop that out, but if we weren't able to crop it out, then I'm just showing you how to fix it. Maybe just a tad. There we go. Okay. So that's before, and that's after. That took care of it. We just took the red out by dragging that down in the red channel, and then we darkened it in the RGB channel by dragging the curve down. So there's before and there's after. Okay. That's good to know how to do. Okay, one thing that we didn't do to start out that we probably should have is we didn't retouch his skin, but we can still do it. Let's click on the cutout. I'm going to press Command G to group it. Click on that again, and then I'm going to create another blank layer, and we're going to use the healing brush again. Same principle as before. Press J for the healing brush. I'm going to make my brush smaller by pressing Command and Option, dragging to the left. I'm going to make sure my edges feather just a little bit, and then I'm going to go in here and Option click on the part that I want to sample, and then just clone. Again, it's set to current below, and then you're on a blank layer on top of the part that you're retouching. And this doesn't have to be perfect. This is obviously not a beauty image or anything like that. So we don't have to get everything, but we are going to retouch it a little bit, just some of these blemishes. And that's generally that's the rule that I follow when I do any kind of team pictures is if somebody's got skin that's not, I mean, nobody has perfect skin, but if it, I mean, I would retouch it a little bit. I wouldn't go too far. Number one, because typically people don't buy a ton individually for team pictures. The team collectively, you might make some good money, but you're not going to individually, each person's not going to buy that much. So you got to be time effective. And I'm going to show you another way to speed that up too. I'm just taking out the major blemishes here, which he doesn't have really bad skin, but we're going to smooth it out a little bit. Just don't want it to go overboard. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. I know I'm going really fast, but I'm just basically doing the same thing over and over. I'm option clicking to sample and then painting over the area I want to heal. Okay, I press Z and I'm going to hold option to zoom out. Okay, there's a couple areas here I need to smooth that a little bit. Some of this could be fixed with dodging and burning too, but again, this is not like a high-end retouch. You don't need to spend a crazy amount of time on it. Okay, there's before, there's after. That makes a big difference. Okay. All right, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to run a filter, and if you want to leave it like this, then that's fine. I have this. I bought this filter. I think it's maybe a couple $100, maybe $100. I'm not sure exactly how much it is, but it's called Portraiture, and it's a skin softening filter. And it can really save you time if you do a lot of stuff like, well, with anything, because it's kind of a workaround for retouching skin. It's not like how professionals would probably do it, a professional retoucher, but at the same time, you gotta do everything you can to speed up workflow. And if it looks good and it works pretty well, then I say go with it. So what we're gonna do is we're on the top layer here. I'm gonna press Shift Option Command E. And that's going to stamp everything visible and make it onto one layer on the top. I'm going to name this Portraiture. Okay, so I've got that layer. I'm going to go over here to my actions. I have an action for Portraiture over here. See Matt's actions right there. And basically, I've run this program and I've saved my settings and I've created an action for it. So it's gonna soften his skin, but not too much. So I go over here to my. You can also go to Filter, Image Dynamic, and Portraiture. But I've got an action for it. I'm gonna click on it, press play, make sure you're on that top layer, and it's gonna basically duplicate that layer. And so I'm gonna throw the original away. I'm gonna click it and drag it to the trash can. Okay, see, there you go. Now that's just it's very subtle, but it helped quite a bit. All right, so I'm going to press Option and click on that layer. I'm going to press Option and click on the mask to create a black mask so it's all hidden. And then I'm going to press B for my brush tool. Make sure my flow is set to 100 now, so press Shift 0. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, and I'm going to make sure white is my foreground. You can press D to go to your default colors, then press X to toggle back and forth between black and white. Again, black conceals, white reveals on a mask. So I've got white selected. I'm going to go ahead and paint this layer back, just on his face. And then I'm going to press X to go to black, and I'm going to take it out where his eyes, eyebrows, nostrils, and there's mouth. So we're going to press Option and click on the mask. There it is. So that's the part that the only part that it's showing that softening layer for is right there. Okay. So I'm going to group both those by holding Shift and clicking, and then press Command G and name that Retouch. Oop. All right, and so there's without the retouch, and there's with it. Okay, so we're looking good now. Okay. I'm gonna name this player, group player. Okay. All right, now we need to build some contrast in here. So what we're gonna do to do that is we're gonna go down here to our adjustment layers again, and we're gonna add a black and white adjustment layer. And we're gonna set the blending mode to soft light. And that is adding some contrast. There we go. That looks really good. Now, I think these blues are a little bit dark. So on the black and white adjustment layer, I'm going to go to my blues and I'm going to drag it to the right, and that's going to brighten them up a little bit right there. And actually, I think the background could be brightened up quite a bit as it is. So we're going to go back to our curves group here, open it up, make another curves layer, same way we did before. Okay, and then we're going to brighten the whole background up. So we're going to click on that curve, make sure you're on RGB, which is the default, and brighten it up. Okay, now when we do that, you see the bottom is still a little bit dark. So we are going to go back to our original curves layer right here that darkened the top. We're going to click on it and we're going to darken it even more right there. So we're even. So there's the new layer without, there's before, and there's after. Okay. Okay, so there's without our curves on the background and with our curves. That's nice and even. Looks pretty good. Okay. All right, now we've got our black and white layer. And anytime when you do this black and white layer adjustment layer on top and you set it to soft light or overlay, sometimes overlay works. That's a little, well, actually, I kind of like that. It's blowing out the jersey a little bit though. So we're going to go back to soft light. Kind of like overlay. Maybe we could go in and paint away his jersey. That might be a good idea. We're going to stick with soft light, I think, just to be safe. I don't want to go too heavy-handed here. Okay, so anytime you use this black and white adjustment layer and set it to overlay or soft light to create contrast, you can slide these colors. Like if his skin's too dark, you can slide yellow to the right. It's going to brighten it up for you. I think we're good in this case. Maybe a little bit to the right. Just a hair. Well, nah, we'll leave it. Okay. All right. Okay, now we need to sharpen this now. We're getting close to being done here. So to sharpen it, let's see what happens if we duplicate that layer. I'm going to press Command J on the black and white layer. Okay. You know what? I think we're going to do that and set the opacity. You can just press the number key when you're on a layer and it'll set the opacity. So like 2 makes 20%, 3 makes 30. Kind of like that, to be honest. I don't like it on his hand. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and open my player layer. I'm going to press Command click on the mask so that's the selection that we have there, so we don't paint outside him. I'm going to select the mask on that new black and white layer, press B for my brush. I'm going to set my flow to 10% by pressing Shift, and you can press Shift 1 and it'll go to 10%. Make sure black's my foreground, and I'm going to paint it away like on his hand there. And then on his jersey. Because I don't know that we need that black and white layer on that, but I do like it like on his skin and on his glove. Press Command D to deselect. Yeah, I like that. We're gonna leave it. Well, you know what? We maybe should take it out of his hair here too. A little bit dark on the hair. Okay. All right. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. All right, so let's sharpen it. Let's press Shift, click, and then Command G to group those and put ADJ for adjustment. I'm gonna close my player layer. Okay. All right, so now let's go ahead and sharpen this a little bit now. So I'm gonna stamp visible again by pressing Shift, Option, Command E, and I'm gonna duplicate that by pressing Command J, and then I'm gonna hold Shift, click both of them, press Command G again. I'm gonna group it. I'm gonna name this Sharpen. All right, so let's open this layer. All right, so this one, we're going to create a couple high pass layers. I'm going to filter on the bottom one, filter, other, high pass. I'm going to select 2 for my radius, and let me turn that top layer off. Okay, filter, other, high pass, 2. All right, so you just want the lighter area to show up just a little bit. Press OK. I got 2 for my radius, then I'm going to set that to overlay. All right, so I'm going to turn it off. Turn it on. See, it's sharpening that there. Okay, now I'm going to sharpen the larger areas too. So I'm going to click on that other layer and go to Filter, Other, High Pass again. I'm going to select a radius of 10 this time. So you're getting that little halo there. And you see more detail. Press OK. And we're going to set that to soft light. So it's not quite as strong. Soft light and overlay are very similar, but overlay is stronger. Okay, and we only want this to affect him because we want the focus to be him, not the background. So we've got our group here. Let's turn it off. There's before and there's after. See it sharpening the background. It's also creating a little bit of a halo around him, and that's the downfall to high pass sharpening. But how we're going to fix that is we're going to go back down here to our player layer, and I'm going to press Command and click on the mask. Turn my sharpen layer on. I'm going to click on the group of sharpen, and then we've got our mask selected for him for our cutout, and I'm going to press the mask button, and there now we've just got him sharpened now. So you can press Shift to get rid of the mask. There's with the whole image sharpened, and there's with just him sharpened. Okay, so we're getting pretty close here. I think that's good. I'm going to wait to crop this in Lightroom. I typically do crop things in Lightroom after the fact. That way that you don't lose anything if you want to change it later. So, okay, so real quick, let's turn everything off. All right, so we've got our first layer is the retouch for his face, or for the background. Okay, we've got our background. We've got our heel for the background to take out those distracting parts of the wall. Now we've got our curves adjustment layer, and that's going to affect him also. We've got our curves to make that background more blue, to take care of that flare and how it was washed out. Then we've got our cutout, which we use the quick selection tool for. And that includes the retouch of his skin before and after. And then we've got our adjustment layers on top, a couple black and white adjustment layers set to soft light blending mode to create contrast. That's before, that's after. And then we sharpened it at the end. So now I'm going to flatten this by pressing this little caret with the 4 lines beside it on the layers palette. Go to flatten image and then press Command S. And that is going to save it back into Lightroom. So let's go back over here to Lightroom. Okay, there's our new image. Let's compare the two. I'm going to press Shift and the right arrow key and then in. And then there's before and after. Let's switch them here. Before on the left, after on the right. Okay, so we're almost done. Now, let's go to the Develop module. Let's do a few finishing touches here. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go down here to Luminance in my HSL sliders here, and I'm going to go to Blue, and I'm going to slide it to the right 20 ticks. So there's before, and there's after. It's going to make everything a little bit more blue. I'm sorry, going to make the blue a little bit brighter, and then we're going to go to Saturation, and we're also going to up that about 15. There we go. And when you do saturation like that, you got to be careful that your skin doesn't get too orange. But see, we desaturated it when we had that black and white layer, so I don't think we're going to have an issue. There's before, and there's after. So that made everything a little bit more dramatic. Now, one thing that I love to do is add clarity, but I don't like to do it globally because everything doesn't need clarity, especially like his skin probably. So when you slide the clarity slider to the right, it really grunges everything up, and that's way too much. But I would like to have it on his jersey, maybe his glove. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up to our adjustment brush, click on it, and we're going to add, we're going to slide the clarity slider to the right to about 50. Well, we'll just do 51. Okay. Now, I'm going to click on Auto Mask down here at the bottom, and that is going to allow Lightroom to kind of detect the edges of what I'm painting on. And that's going to let me it's going to know what I want painted, what I don't, but judging on where my mouse is going. So we've got our feather set to 100, flow to 100, density to 100, and the size is 5. Now you can press your right and left bracket to make the brush bigger or smaller, and if you're on a tablet, I've got my adjustment wheel here to wheel it. I've got a medium Wacom Intuos 4 here. This little, the wheel here can make my brush bigger and smaller. So I'm just going to, oh, one more thing. Check Show Selected Mask Overlay. It's going to make everything pink that you're painting on that's being affected by this adjustment layer, or this brush here. See how it's detecting the edges there? If I didn't have that, if I didn't have Auto Mask checked, it would be getting on the background a lot, and we don't want that, definitely. We just want it on his jersey. This is going to add a little bit more drama to the image without putting it on his skin in places that you don't want it in the background. You can hold Option to take away, because we got on the background a little bit there. I'm going to paint on his glove also. Just like that. Okay, and then maybe his hat and his glasses here. His glasses will probably look pretty cool with this painted on there. Okay, now I'm going to uncheck Show Selected Mask Overlay. Hit Close over here on my brush. Okay, so let's go over here in our history. There's before the clarity was added, and then after. You don't want to do too much, but I think that did just enough. And then you know what? I'm gonna do something else to it too. I'm gonna click on my adjustment brush again. Click the button so that you know that's the part that's the brush you just added. I'm gonna make the highlights just a tad darker too. Not much. Just add a little bit more detail. Okay. All right. So there's before the brush, and there's after. All right. And then you can also press the slash key above return. There's before in Lightroom, there's after. And one more thing, we're going to crop it by pressing R. I'm going to hold shift to constrain my proportions, drag down. And there we go. All right, and there is our finished image. So there's before on the left, and there's the retouch on the right. And again, and this is not a portfolio piece, although I do really like this portrait. But this gives you an idea of a lot of the stuff that I do. A lot of my business comes from teams, like I said, high school teams, sports teams, and this is something like a typical example of what I would do. And to be honest with you, a lot of teams like this are used to really crappy sports pictures. I don't know why the industry standard is so low, but you know, if you give them something lit like this, dramatic, really nice, nicely edited, they're going to flip out and they will absolutely love it. So again, the main reason I showed you this was to show you how to overcome the problem of this sun flare, and I've ordered a hood mount loop since then, so that doesn't happen again. But again, I think that it was good because it did create a hair light. It did create some more editing time also, but in the end, you know, the result is what matters. And but you also have to be efficient with your time. So keep that in mind. You would not probably want something like this to happen, but I could have put a scrim gem over him or something to help take care of that, but I couldn't see it in the back of my camera. So, but that's how you take care of it if it ever happens. And that's it for today. Thanks for stopping by. Again, my name is Matt Hernandez. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to my website, matthernandezphotography.com. I've got a blog on there and all my social media links. And I appreciate you stopping by. See you again next time.